The EXPO modules are built to NMRA standards. You can download an illustrated PDF file showing you how to build a module. You can download it from this web address. Hey, Dave Frary here. Welcome to this little video about building the EXPO module. Now, the EXPO module is just an HO standard gauge module. It's 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, and the rail, when we're done with this, will stand about 40 inches from the floor. That way, all the other modules that are built to the same standards, they'll all align with each other. It'll be easy to connect them together, and we can run the trains. What I've done is put down a sheet of 1/2 inch thick gator board. This is gator board. It's pretty tough stuff. It has a resin-coated paper top, I believe. I could be wrong on that. It has foam in the middle, and it's fairly waterproof. In fact, I had this sheet in the back of my truck when I brought it back from where I bought it. It was raining to beat the band, and the sheet never buckled or warped or absorbed any water. So I guess it's made for the outdoor sign business, and it certainly will work good for that. Over the gator board, I have a sheet of 1 inch thick pink foam. This is regular insulating foam, and you can get this in places like Home Depot or any building supply center. Now, in some places, I want to have a little bit of a higher area, so I've added another piece of 1 inch foam. I'm going to put a lighthouse here. There'll be water here. These bridges are just deck girder plates glued to the side of the 1 inch foam, and they make a pretty reasonable looking bridge. I've also have the 1 inch foam under the track to support it. I didn't hollow out under the track, although I did go in here and I carved out a little bit so you can kind of look under, but you're looking right at black paint. So on this side of the module over here, you can see I've added some white 1/4 inch thick foam core. This is where the roads are going to be, or the road. There'll be one road coming through the middle of this. And every place I'm going to have a structure, I've added a little piece of foam core to sit it on. I want the structures up so that they are fairly equal with the height of the track. In between, I took a piece of basswood and I cut it to shape, and I beveled the edges so that it sits down at least a 1/64 of an inch below the rail level. And the reason for this is that when we go to clean the track, we don't want to be tearing up the scenery. We want to clean just the tops of the rails and not the roads while we're doing it. And over on this side, I have a piece of styrene and a piece of very thin styrofoam. I want the structure I put here to sit down a little below the scenery. It's in the background, and the way I've built this, I've built it kind of backwards because the horizon is going to be back here on the backdrop. So I want everything except for the lighthouse to kind of go downhill as it goes to the back. This is just opposite of most philosophies of model railroads where you build the back up. You give the buildings a better look, and there's actually a better spatial relationship if everything goes up. I'm going to try it the opposite and see what happens. The first and foremost, this is a lighthouse. This is a Walthers plastic kit that I had on the shelf. I had built it for another project and never used it, but you can see it's going to look very nice here. In this area where the weights were holding the foam in place, by the way, I use liquid nails to glue everything down here. I like it. There's going to be this little structure. It needs some paint, but it's going to be sitting just about like this. Now here, I'm putting the Foss scale, Dave's Oyster or Celiosa's Oyster, Dave's Barbecue or whatever it is. I'm putting this here, and right in front of it here, I'm going to be putting a little pier. I haven't decided how it's going to go yet, probably something like that. This stuff was built up for another project and I never used it. I always overbuild when I do this. Okay, for the other side of the street here, I'm going to put in this little building, which is all set. You see it's already on a base and it already has details on it. I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to put this Robin Hood Beer Company, probably somewhere in here. I don't want these buildings to compete with the lighthouse. I want the lighthouse to stand alone and be the predominant feature on the layout. This little building is going down at sea level right in front of the lighthouse. And this building is going in the front right-hand corner. Last but not least is this plaster model of Marble Station. It's going in the foreground right beside the track. There's only one more building to place, and that's in the very foreground, which will be right here. It's a little large for HO scale, but it works in the foreground because it is a little oversized. I don't know where the building came from. It was one of the things I built a long time ago, and I put it on a little base with a few details around it, but it'll fit good there beside the track. My next step here is to put in any retaining walls, especially the sea walls around here, the rocks around the front of the lighthouse, and then we'll finish the scenery. These sea walls are cast in resin from a rubber mold I made from an original, and what I did, I ran them through the bandsaw so that they were about the same height as our little foundation, the pink foam and the styrene here. And what I'm going to do with them, I'm going to hold them in place using liquid nails, and I put a little bead on, and I'm just going to push it into place here. Now liquid nails is okay, but you got to allow it to set for several hours and sometimes overnight. I also, as you can see in the picture, I took the ends of the retaining walls and I put them on the sander, and I set the little guide on the sander at 45 degrees so that it sanded the ends at 45-degree angles so I could just push them together. Now if you look at them straight on, the rocks really don't match very well. But for this thing, nobody's ever going to see that, so it doesn't have to be perfect. All you need is a piling in front of it, and you've hidden it. You'll see as I prop these retaining walls in place and prop some of the rocks and other things in place as I build this, that I use a lot of weights. And these weights have been collected over the years from who knows where. I don't know where I got them all. Every time I'd see something that looked like I could use it in the hobby, I'd pick it up and stick it in my pocket and bring it home. So I have a collection of weights, a really large collection, and I use them every day for almost every project. Now I'm putting the rocks in place. These are pieces of styrofoam rocks that are sold by Scenic Express. I use these all the time for most everything because they're lightweight, they are fairly inexpensive for what they are, and there's no waste with them. You can manipulate them by cutting them, breaking them, and using them in many different places. I'm using liquid nails to hold the little pieces in place, and I know that some of these rocks, after they've been mounted in place, will be covered by sculptor mold. But you can take a wet brush and you can brush away some of the sculptor mold to reveal the tip of the rock. After all the little rock pieces are glued in place, I'm going to wait a while, perhaps an hour or two. Then the rocks will be ready to apply the sculptor mold. And you can follow along and watch me do it here. I use sculptor mold for almost all my projects, and I think it's the best terrain building material that's available. Here's the little 1-inch high platform for the building that will set here right next to the water, and it needs some kind of retaining wall system around it. And looking through my scrap box, I found these 1-inch high pieces of precast resin retaining walls. Some are painted, some aren't. And I'm using Beacon's 3-in-1 craft adhesive. I use this for a lot of stuff. It's as good as liquid nails on some things. And if you need some real tack and you need something that will hold something in place or fill a gap or something like that, the Beacon 3-in-1 is pretty good. And it doesn't attack styrofoam. And you'll see here I'm using weights again, and I'm going to apply some Beacon 3-in-1 craft adhesive to another little piece of wall here, and then slide the weight up to hold everything in place until the Beacon stuff dries. Here's all the little weights in place, and everything is waiting for the Sculptamold to come. For those of you not familiar with Sculptamold, it's a product made by the American Art Clay Company in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's sold in most craft stores and in many larger hobby shops. I like it because it mixes cleanly with water. In other words, it doesn't leave a residue on the bowl, on the spatula. Everything cleans up very, very easily and quickly with the water. And you have the advantage of working Sculptamold for about 20 to 30 minutes before it finally hardens. Now, what I do, I trowel it on and just move it around and fill space with it. I finish my sculpting by using a wet brush, and with the wet brush you can push it into nooks and crannies. You can create surface texture, because Sculptamold by itself has more or less the texture of cottage cheese. So all the final finishing and texturing of the surface, I like to do it with this. This is a 1-inch China bristle brush. It's been around the world. I use it for everything. I have a whole box full of these. They all look just like this one, very grubby looking. But I keep dipping this in water, and then you can use the bristles to pat, like I'm doing here, pat on the texture, or you can push the Sculptamold in place. It's still very workable. And one of the last things I'm going to do with this, I'm going to take the tip of the brush and I'm going to push some of the Sculptamold down over the edge where I think that I'm going to put sand. It's time to mix another batch of Sculptamold, and you can see how simple this is. This is just, I just put some in a paper cup and dump it in the rubber mixing bowl and then just add some water to it. This is the way it looks in the craft store when you see it. I can't show you a bag here on the layout because I don't have a bag. I have a 50-pound container of this stuff. I use an awful lot of it. Now I've mixed a much looser consistency here, and I'm troweling it around the rocks where the lighthouse will sit. Now you'll see I'm covering up some of the rocks, and I don't really care about that. The rocks behind the Sculptamold provide a little bit of bulk, and if I'm really concerned about showing these rocks, I can take the wet brush and go in here and move some Sculptamold away from the face of the rock. So this little demonstration will give you some idea of how to use Sculptamold or any other modeling product on your module. I chose Sculptamold because when it dries, it's very lightweight, it's strong, and it's slightly flexible. I've been using it on modules and sectional layouts for years without a problem. So, this is the end of this little tutorial. It'll bring you up to speed. It'll get you to the point where you can start your scenery. In the next tutorial, I'll demonstrate painting the scenery, and then we'll put some structures in place and then add the foliage. So stay tuned.